Hey friends, this is day 116 of Russian war against Ukraine. If you've been wondering about when this war is going to be over and how do things look from Ukrainian standpoint, then this is the video for you. Today we're going to talk about a few things. Number one, what's happening in eastern Ukraine where most of the fighting is being done. Number two, we're going to talk about Belarus, and they're actually started officially mobilizing for war. Number three, we're going to talk about the conference, the Ramstein conference, which is happening for the third time, and what's happening there. And number four, last week the three European leaders visited Ukraine and what came out of that. So number one, the reason you're not hearing a lot about the war right now is because it's a heavily stable situation, which means that there's heavy losses on both sides, but the front is not moving. So there's three different directions in the eastern Ukraine where Russian armies are trying to take advantage. They're concentrating their forces and hoping with larger numbers. Sometimes it's like 5 or 7 to 1, trying to break through Ukrainian front lines, but they can't. One of the cities that is experiencing heavy fighting is Severodonetsk, and Severodonetsk is important because it's the last large city in Luhansk region, which they're trying to overtake entirely, which will be some kind of a win for Putin since he recognized the independent Republic of Luhansk 3 to 4 months ago at the beginning of this war. So they're trying to get it any price that they can incur. So there's heavy fighting. Severodonetsk in different parts goes back and forth between Russians and Ukrainians. Other cities are seeing heavy artillery fire. Especially tragic the situation is in Kyiv, which saw some relief in the last month, but is being shelled right now. And in true Russian fashion, what's being shelled is not actually military objects, but living quarters. If you've been to Ukraine or know a little bit about bigger cities, it's the living high rises. They're clumped together in these living regions, quarters, and that's where the Russians are shelling. And the strategy, of course, is that if they cannot take the city, they will try to intimidate the civilians. So they apply pressure to government, so the government goes into peace talks or some kind of concessions. So that's the Russian strategy. They know they cannot take any of the big cities in Ukraine, so they're trying to do what they did in Aleppo these past years, is just level the city to the ground, so there's nothing there. Then another reason for that is because Russian troops, the reserves they're pulling up is there are untrained. These are young guys who haven't been trained like a week or two at maximum and been thrown into the combat. They don't know what they're doing. So to compensate for their incompetency, what Russia does is applies a scorched earth tactic, which means that we will level everything to the ground, and then our incompetent troops can they can fight with desolate cities. So unfortunately, that's what's going on. The front's not moving. Ukrainian armed forces are waiting for the heavy artillery to arrive, and it seems like we've been talking about that for a while. Like, when is this going to happen? We've been talking about when is this going to arrive and when this turning point is going to be. Well, first of all, around 80 howitzers are already in Ukrainian fronts, and they already are helping. So a couple of weeks ago, you may have heard that Ukrainians started counterattack actions, not to be confused with the actual counterattack. But the actions means that they have split that Russian front in two, and they are trying to fortify their positions in the southern Ukraine near Kherson, so they can actually take that back. And that was possible in large part because of the howitzers, the M777 we've gotten from the United States. So part of that is there. The actual land lease actually starts in October. Per the signed law, but the weaponry we're getting now is under a different program that has been signed by President Biden, and it was 40 billion and additional 1 billion, which would be able to get us through to October, when we're going to be getting unlimited heavy weaponry under the Lend-Lease program. So we're waiting for more weapons to arrive. Another problem is that Ukrainians are not trained to use American European weapons. So there is that period when they're being trained. They're being trained in England. They're being trained in what was the other country? In Portugal as well, to use long-range artillery such as howitzers. So it's sort of a waiting game, and we need to stand our ground as long as we can before we have a critical mass of heavy weaponry in order to be able to push back. So that's what's happening in eastern Ukraine. Central Ukraine, western Ukraine, it's all being quiet. So, for example, my native Cherkasy is being quiet. We've seen 100,000 more people arrive to Cherkasy than it used to be. So it used to be like 250,000, so 250 to 350. So there's quite a bit to deal with there as well. There's quite a bit of displaced people moving to western Ukraine to cities like Lviv and others. So there's definitely swelling. There's been 5 million internally displaced people who have decided to go abroad, mostly Germany, Poland, Czech Republic, some in Hungary. Of course, Hungary is pro-Russian, so Ukrainians there are not experiencing a really good really warm welcome there. All right, so another trend we're seeing in the last couple of weeks is that Belarus has officially started mobilizing. We're seeing that their self-appointed dictator, Lukashenko, he's doing fancy footwork not to involve himself in Ukraine. So about a month ago, he proclaimed that they're gathering Народное ополчение, which is like the people's uprising, which is to say, like, well, it's not me, it's the people who have decided to group themselves into military battalions and protect our motherland. Right now, they're actually, in the last 3 days, they have started official mobilization. And what we think is going to happen is that Putin had applied enough pressure to Lukashenko to put in his troops on Ukrainian ground, which would be the western Ukraine. And from that end, we have another ally, Poland, who had a long time ago had said that we reserve the right to act independently from NATO, and if Belarus moves in, they might help us. Poland understands the urgency of the situation a lot more than any other country, apart from Baltic probably, because they understand if Ukraine falls, they're literally the next in their path. Okay, so the conference, which is called Ramstein, but this time was held in Brussels, but it's called Ramstein because the first time it was gathered there. 2 more countries have entered this coalition, so now there's 50 countries which are helping and strategizing about how Ukraine will win and how the world will look after that. There's training and some weaponry deliveries that are happening under that program. As you can see, there's different initiatives going on. There's definitely what UN is doing. There's something that NATO is doing. There's this Ramstein format that's happening. Hopefully, all of them, not hopefully, but all of them are trying to achieve the same goal. But there's all kinds of different geopolitical interests that are being played out in. Right before our eyes. And so the last topic we're talking about is the 3 European leaders which arrived to Kyiv on Thursday or Friday. Nobody knows for sure because it's classified information, but we know that the 3 leaders came. One was the president of France, what's his name? Macron. Emmanuel Macron. Number 2, Chancellor of Germany, Olaf Scholz. And number 3 is the Premier of Italy, Draghi. So, and actually the experts, the political experts on Ukraine have different opinion of what their purpose was. Some are saying that no, they're actually trying to get Ukraine to win, but do it in a graceful manner. Others are saying that they came to Kyiv to convince Zelenskiy to cede the territories that have already been occupied by Russians and start peace talks. And as evidence of that, they're saying, well, first of all of those countries are heavily dependent on Russia. They have deep ties with the Russian oligarchy and Kremlin itself, but also because right before they came, the press secretary of Putin, Dmitry Peskov, tweeted something like, well, we hope the European leaders will help Ukrainian President Zelensky to see the real situation. Basically, he was sort of preempting their program of convincing Zelensky, by saying, well, this is, you're in deep shit, you're not going to get anything back, so stop where you are, go to peace talks, and hopefully you'll keep the rest of the territory that you currently control. So, but regardless of what their first intentions were, they actually went to see the destructions and the conditions in places like Bucha, which was basically a torture ground in the first 2 months of the war. When they came out of it, both Macron and Scholz said that there is no peace talks. There is no talking to Putin. There is no way to try to talk him into any kind of sense. So they're saying we're going to be working to help the victory of Ukraine. What we're seeing here is actually a geopolitical game which unfolds right in front of our eyes. We're seeing Italy, Germany, and France are sort of the old Europe. And if you know the history of the European Union a little bit, France has always tried to play the central part in European Union. When EU just started, they were sort of, the rules were held around, were built around France, and then they quit for a while, the EU, and then they came back. So these old forces are trying to keep the status quo because the time has been good to them. You know, cheap natural gas, cheap oil, access to Russian oligarchy or Russian money. There's actually proven ties, financial and otherwise, with a lot of the governments in these two countries. So you can think of them as sort of the old Europe, the Europe that wants to keep the situation as it has been. Ukraine has always been viewed as sort of part of Russia. It's been occupied before, so what's the big deal if they live under Russia for a bit longer? So that's why I think there's credence to the thought that the three European leaders from old Europe tried to keep to roll back the situation, but hopefully places like Bucha and hearing the stories and seeing the videos and photographs had changed their mind a little bit, because what's happening there's no justification for keeping the status quo after what Russia has been doing in Ukraine. And I don't have to tell you that. I mean, that would be R-rated video really quickly. What's interesting is that the next day, Boris Johnson, of course the Premier of England, came to Ukraine, and he had a totally different attitude right off the bat. He's totally towards pulling towards the military victory of Ukraine. He says, if you give us a battalion of your soldiers in a month's time, they're going to come back. In 6 weeks, they're going to come back as NATO trained army. So he's rooting for Ukraine. He's not holding back. He's sort of more radically geared, which is what we want, because we want this war to be over and as soon as possible, because every day there's civilians dying, there's soldiers dying. So you may have heard even from the beginning of this conversation that the geopolitics might change, because what England is proposing is that there's sort of a defensive alliance between England, Poland, and Ukraine, which will be acting as a shield from Russia for the rest of Europe. And for us, this is good. Most of analysts I'm following and listening to, they're saying that this will create a strong bond. Ukrainians know how to fight. We're getting a lot of training. We're understanding what the warfare of the 21st century is like. Poland, of course, is a big power, is a big country. They have just ordered 500 Patriot systems, I believe. So they're rearming themselves. And England, of course, has always been the benchmark, and they just quit the EU, so they're looking for new partners. So as where we stand right now, we may see some major changes in the geopolitical structure of Europe and possibly the world, because we've seen that NATO has proven that it's not all it's cracked up to be. It's indecisive. the UN is being totally impotent, and I think everybody realizes this at this point. So the situation calls for new strong leaders, for new strong alliances, in which Ukraine is going to be an integral part, if not the central force. So right now what we're looking at is what's happening in Belarus, what's happening with the deliveries of heavy armory, of heavy weaponry. Germany, of course, is going back and forth. Olaf Scholz he's pronouncing that we're gonna deliver all these weapons to Ukraine, and then it gets delayed, and then he has another reason why it's not happened yet. So we're seeing that a lot of people are reprioritizing where they stand. They want to look ahead. What's the world going to look like when this war is over, and hopefully be on the winning side when it is over. So it is. I would say it would be fascinating to watch if it was not as tragic as it is actually now, to see my own people, brothers and sisters, die every day. So I'm watching with alarm and worrying, and hopefully the European leaders, the countries that have the most military power, will make the right choice for themselves and for Ukraine, and together we will defeat this territorial warmongering expedition that Russia finds themselves on right now. All right, that's it. I'm going to come out with another video within a week or two to give you an update. As I said, things are not moving fast like they were in the first couple of months of the war, but what's happening here is fundamental changes in how we view the world, different players in the world, and how the structure of power is going to change. All right, see you next video.